At just past 13:45 on a rain-soaked afternoon, nearly 24 Russian armored vehicles tore down a churning, muddy dirt road near the settlement of Kostiantan, pushing toward Nivka with a sense of aggressive urgency that would soon prove fatal. The column commander had calculated his movement based on the heavy cloud cover, convinced that the torrential downpour had grounded every Ukrainian surveillance platform in the sector, essentially granting his unit a cloak of invisibility for their approach to the jumping-off point for the next day's assault. However, what the Russian officer failed to realize was that 3 separate Ukrainian drone teams had been staring at high-resolution weather radar feeds for hours, identifying a rapidly disintegrating storm cell that the Russians had assumed was static. In a matter of mere minutes, the sky cleared with a suddenness that felt almost artificial, transforming what was supposed to be a secure administrative march into a perfectly illuminated kill zone. The armored vehicles, now exposed under the breaking clouds, were racing against a clock they did not know was ticking, completely unaware that their tactical surprise had been reversed by a simple meteorological gap that the Ukrainians had been waiting to exploit with surgical patience. As the rain stopped, the 3 concealed Ukrainian drone teams scrambled into a choreographed frenzy of activity, powering up 2 distinct waves of first-person view drones simultaneously across 3 distinct launch sites hidden in the tree lines. The silence of the wet fields was instantly replaced by the high-pitched whine of brushless motors spinning from idle to maximum revolutions per minute in less than 2 seconds, a sound that usually signals impending violence in modern warfare. The sudden break in the weather meant that visibility surged from a claustrophobic few hundred meters to a crystal-clear field of view stretching for miles instantly, revealing the Russian column as a stark, dark contrast against the muddy road. The vehicles were strung out in a single-file formation stretching the length of several football fields, a target presentation that drone operators dream about, a mile away from the safety of the concrete structures of an abandoned collective farm. If the armor reached those hardened shelters, they would be virtually immune to light drone attacks and would be free to wreak havoc on Ukrainian lines the following dawn, meaning the column had to be stopped in the open, right here and right now. The moment those drones lifted off the wet grass and transmitted their first control signals, the electromagnetic spectrum lit up like a Christmas tree on the screens of a nearby Russian Servus-5 electronic warfare array. This system, designed specifically to hunt localized radio frequency emissions, identified the unique signature of the drone control links in a fraction of a second, seemingly faster than a human operator could even blink. The control signals, broadcasting on standard commercial frequencies, were as conspicuous as flares in a dark room to the sensitive antennas of the electronic warfare complex. Within a multi-kilometer radius, the system's algorithms triangulated the Ukrainian launch positions to the precision of a city block, a margin of error that was terrifyingly accurate for the precision artillery batteries waiting in the rear. The geolocation data flowed instantly through encrypted digital channels to Russian gun crews positioned deep behind the advancing column, who were already in the process of loading laser-guided rounds into their breeches, turning a drone hunt into a race against incoming high-explosive shells. Each of the Ukrainian drones climbed rapidly through the dissipating rain clouds, their operators pushing the throttle sticks forward to gain altitude before the Russian counter-battery fire could react to their location. However, climbing high meant exposing their radio signatures above the terrain masking, the natural valleys and ridges that usually blocked radar returns, and putting them directly in the line of sight of a Russian Orlan 30 reconnaissance drone loitering a mile overhead. The Orlan's camera pod immediately swung toward the fresh launch signatures, its sensitive infrared sensors picking up the minute heat blooms generated by the operator's equipment despite their use of thermal blankets. The reconnaissance drone data-linked precise coordinates back to the waiting artillery tubes, but its role was far more critical than just spotting. Its gimbal-mounted laser designator began painting the Ukrainian positions with a coded infrared beam that the incoming artillery shells would hunt for during their terminal phase. Drone would maintain this laser lock for the entire duration of the shell's flight, constantly adjusting for wind drift and target movement to ensure a direct hit. This lethal synchronization was managed by the Russian Zoo-Park M1 counter-battery radar system, which was calculating firing solutions based on the initial drone transmissions while the Orlan provided the final terminal guidance. The Zoo-Park system worked by measuring the time difference of signal arrival at 3 separate receivers spread across the battlefield, a technique that relies on the immutable constants of physics. When a Ukrainian drone transmitted a control packet, each receiver logged the exact microsecond the signal arrived, and since radio waves travel at the speed of light, Even nanosecond differences revealed the precise distance variations between the receivers and the source. These three receivers created intersecting geometric lines that pinpointed the transmission source like a mathematical crosshair, feeding coordinates into the fire control network. Within less than 2 minutes, guided artillery rounds would impact these coordinates with enough explosive power to collapse any bunker not built from reinforced concrete. And the Ukrainian positions, dug hastily into the earth and reinforced only with timber, offered zero protection against such precision. The stakes for the first Ukrainian drone team were brutally simple: hand off control of their airborne drones to the next team and run for their lives, or stay on the controls and get vaporized by the incoming volley. They initiated the complex transfer procedures to the second team while the Russian guided rounds were already arcing through the sky, massive shells with laser seekers adjusting their trajectory in the final seconds of flight to follow the Orlan's invisible beam. The drones under their control switched to a global positioning system waypoint following mode, creating a terrifying vulnerability window where the aircraft flew blind while the control frequencies synchronized with the new operators nearly a kilometer away. Several seconds at highway speeds meant over 100 meters of unguided flight where a gust of wind or a signal glitch could send them smashing into the ground. If the handoff failed, the attack force would be reduced significantly before the engagement even began, wasting valuable munition and alerting the convoy for nothing. The electronic handoff completed with a split-second margin to spare, the green connection lights flashing on the second team's controllers just as the first team sprinted through the wet wheat stubble carrying heavy equipment bags. Behind them, the bunker they had occupied just moments ago erupted into a geyser of earth and splintered wood as the laser-guided shells found their mark moments after the team had evacuated. On the Russian side, the column's defenses were waking up. The BMP-T Terminator support vehicles were tracking multiple air contacts on their radar. These specialized urban combat vehicles packed dual 30mm autocannons, automatic grenade launchers, and anti-tank missiles, providing enough firepower to theoretically create an impenetrable anti-drone umbrella over the entire column. Their turrets elevated rapidly as the drone signatures populated their threat displays, the mechanical whine of their traverse gears signaling that the element of total surprise had officially evaporated. The second Ukrainian team now found themselves controlling a massive swarm simultaneously, which doubled their electromagnetic signature and made them an impossible-to-miss beacon for the Russian sensors. The Orlan 30 overhead immediately locked their new position with its infrared laser, while the electronic warfare suite detected the distinct signal spike that occurred when both operators transmitted during the handoff. The accuracy of the Russian triangulation tightened significantly, giving the second team a rapidly closing window before the next salvo of guided rounds arrived at their location. Artillery rounds were already walking toward them, the first shell impacting dangerously close and throwing a massive cloud of wet dirt into the air. The operators kept their hands steady on the controls despite the ground shaking violently beneath them, their eyes glued to the drone feeds flickering across their screens, each one racing toward the Russian column at maximum attack speed. The mathematics of survival were becoming increasingly thin for the second team. Mere seconds for the Russian guns to recalculate the new coordinates, the flight time of the shells, but only a blink-and-you-miss-it window to transfer control if the shelling got too close. The third team watched their frequency scanners with intense focus, their systems powered and ready to grab control the instant the second team had to bail out. Another shell hit closer, the concussion wave hitting the operators in the chest like a physical hammer and rattling the tablets in their hands. They initiated the handoff sequence to the third team while simultaneously grabbing their most critical gear, abandoning sleeping bags, rations, and personal items to the mud. The third team smoothly accepted control of the entire swarm, their systems straining to manage the maximum bandwidth load while the second team sprinted through parallel furrows in the wheat field, using the micro-terrain for whatever cover it could provide against the shrapnel slicing through the air. Managing so many drones converging from 3 different launch sites created an immediate airspace deconfliction problem that could destroy the attack before the Russians fired a single shot. At high closure rates, drones launched from different positions would reach the same point in space simultaneously, and 2 racing quadcopters colliding in midair meant both would turn into a cloud of plastic confetti and lithium sparks. The teams had practiced this convergence for weeks, establishing a rigid altitude hierarchy. Team 1's drones would approach at a lower tier, Team 2's at a middle tier, and Team 3's at the highest ceiling. This vertical separation was the only thing preventing a fratricidal disaster, but the video feeds were degrading into static, meaning the operators could not see each other's drones and had to trust the blind choreography they had rehearsed. To complicate the nightmare, the approaching storm cell was now visible to the naked eye, a towering wall of rain advancing rapidly that would arrive over the target area in a handful of minutes. Lightning flickered within the dark mass, each strike generating a powerful electromagnetic pulse that could scramble the delicate control signals of the drones if they flew too close to the charged air. The window for the attack was closing from both ends. Russian artillery was hunting the operators on the ground while the weather was squeezing the airspace from the sky. The drones had to reach their targets in the next 90 seconds, or the entire operation would fail, as the rain returned to blind the cameras and ground the fleet. Battery levels had dropped to critical levels from fighting the increasing headwinds generated by the storm front, giving the pilots exactly one attack run with absolutely no possibility of a second attempt or a go-around. The Russian BMP-T Terminators were built for exactly this scenario, designed to act as a meat grinder for aerial threats. But the Ukrainian operators knew the system had a fatal flaw in its fire control logic. The Terminator's computer prioritized threats by size and speed, constantly recalculating the engagement queue as new contacts appeared on the radar. With a swarm approaching simultaneously, the system stuttered, jumping its targeting lock between identical threats without completing the full engagement sequence for any single one. Worse, the turrets had limited traverse speeds, and the drones were approaching from 3 distinct vectors, forcing the vehicle to choose a sector while leaving its rear and flanks exposed. The fire control system, relying on older algorithms, could not decide which identical drone was the highest priority, so it spent more time slewing the turret back and forth than actually firing. The Ukrainians had synchronized their arrival specifically to exploit this processing bottleneck, flooding the sensor picture with more data than the onboard processors could handle in real time. Despite the saturation tactics, several units disintegrated when 30mm rounds detonated close enough, their plastic frames and electronics scattering across the wheat field as the airburst munitions did their job. But the bulk of the swarm survived the defensive fire and entered their terminal dive phase, the operators selecting specific impact points through the static-filled video feeds. They targeted the gap between the turret and the hull, the delicate engine deck grills, and the spaces where the jury-rigged cage armor, those steel cope cages welded on top of the tanks, didn't quite cover the vulnerable spots. These were not random strikes, but surgical injections of high explosives into the mechanical vitals of the Russian armor. One drone found a gap in a tank's cage armor, detonating against the turret ring and jamming it in place. Another hit a vehicle's open rear door, the explosion destroying the engine block and igniting an immediate electrical fire that filled the crew compartment with toxic smoke. The aftermath unfolded over the following minutes as the surviving Russian crews abandoned their burning vehicles, some running for drainage ditches, while others sprinted toward the tree line in a desperate attempt to escape the invisible swarm. The few remaining drones circled overhead, their operators scanning the carnage for any vehicle that might still be recoverable or operational. One by one, those drones found Russian vehicles that were still serviceable, engines running, tracks intact, and promptly dove in to ensure they would never move again, turning them into permanent fixtures of the Ukrainian countryside. The Russian column, which had begun the hour as a threatening armored fist poised to strike, was now nothing more than a collection of nearly 24 burning wrecks strung out along a muddy road, destroyed by 3 teams of operators who were already packing up their gear and vanishing into the tree line before the storm could catch them. As the storm front finally swept over the burning convoy, dousing the fires with a deluge of cold rain, the 3rd team's reconnaissance drone lingered just long enough to capture high-resolution imagery of the lead vehicle through the steam and smoke. What the operators saw on their tablets confirmed that this was not simply a random mechanized company, but a high-value breakthrough unit carrying specialized equipment that Moscow could not afford to lose. The burning wreckage of a high-mobility vehicle in the center of the formation was not carrying infantry, but was fitted with the distinctive antenna array of a Lear-2 mobile electronic warfare complex. The irony was palpable. The very system designed to jam these frequencies and create a protective electronic bubble around the convoy had been rendered into a smoking pile of scrap metal because its operators had been too slow to react to the frequency-hopping protocols of the commercial drones. The thermal feed showed the distinctive cooling fins of the jamming array warped by the heat of the vehicle's burning fuel, a visual testament to the fact that in modern warfare, expensive electronic countermeasures are only as effective as the human reflexes controlling them. And today, those reflexes were just a few seconds too slow. The economics of this engagement represent a nightmare scenario for military planners in Moscow and a masterclass in asymmetric value destruction. The total cost of the Ukrainian strike package, including the drones, the lost batteries, and the support equipment, came to the price of a mid-range luxury sedan. In exchange, they had effectively removed an entire mechanized combat group from the order of battle before it could fire a single shot in anger. The destruction of the armored vehicles, including the rare and expensive support platforms and the electronic warfare suite, represents a material loss exceeding tens of millions of dollars. That calculates to an astronomical return on investment in under 15 minutes. There is not a hedge fund manager on Wall Street who could generate those kinds of returns without going to prison. Yet on a muddy road near Nivka, 3 teams of volunteers just accomplished it with consumer electronics and duct tape, proving once again that the cost of entry for destroying heavy armor has hit an all-time low. By the time Russian rescue crews finally reached the ambush site well after the engagement, the only thing greeting them was the crackle of ammunition cooking off inside the destroyed hulls and the endless gray rain washing away the tracks of the attackers. The Ukrainian drone teams were already miles away, their equipment packed into civilian vans, blending into the local traffic as if they had never been there. They left behind no radar signature, no expensive infrastructure, and no casualties, only a decimated column that would require months to replace. The Russian artillery batteries continued to pound the empty wheat field for another hour, churning up mud and wasting thousands of dollars in shells on a position that was occupied only by ghosts. The engagement demonstrated the brutal new reality of 21st century combat. If you can be seen, you can be hit. And if you are hitting with cheap electric motors against multi-million-dollar engines, the math will always favor the hunter, who is not afraid to lose a few toys to kill a beast. Meanwhile, the Russian command loop, still operating on a lag caused by the shock of the attack, continued to execute a retaliation plan against an enemy that no longer existed. Artillery batteries positioned deep in the rear continued to pound the empty wheat field for another hour, churning up hectares of mud and wasting thousands of dollars in high-explosive shells on a position that was now occupied only by ghosts. The fire mission was a masterclass in futility. Heavy howitzers delivered a saturation bombardment that would have decimated a fixed infantry platoon. But against a mobile drone team that requires only 5 minutes to pack up and leave, it was simply an expensive landscaping project. This disconnect between the speed of the Russian kill chain and the agility of the Ukrainian operators highlighted a critical failure in doctrine. The Russians were fighting a war of static lines and heavy fires, attempting to destroy grid squares, while their opponents were fighting a war of precise moments, appearing only long enough to kill and then dissolving before the first counter-battery radar could even calculate a firing solution.